Episode 1 of 25, 21 begins in the present day, with Minche arriving for a ballet competition in front of a bunch of judges. Unfortunately, she loses her nerve after watching a talented individual perform before her. She decides to outright quit. Running away from this, Minche ends up at her grandmother's place, staying in her mom's old room where numerous fencing medals are hanging up. While reading around in her room, Minche finds her mom's diary. As she opens it up, she finds juicy details surrounding her life. Minche begins reading the entries, which immediately sees us cut back to the heavily saturated world of 1998. Visually, it's a nice way of differentiating the two time periods, and Hidu is our main protagonist in this time period. She shows up at class on a Saturday, and she's in a joyous mood. This is the one day of the week she enjoys because she can see that kid. However, we're also in the midst of IMF situation too. For those unaware, this is the financial crisis experienced by Koreans in the late 90s, causing a severe foreign exchange shortage, leaving South Korea on the brink of defaulting. Anyway, there are protests in the street about protecting the film industry, but for Hidu, she's too young and naive to even think about this, and continues on her way to Taeyang High. There, she finds Go Yurim. Yurim is a hugely talented fencer, and Hidu has big dreams to one day become her rival. Unfortunately, the IMF crisis sees the fencing team disbanded, and that means Hidu's dreams now rest solely with trying to make it into Taeyang High. She wants a transfer, but her mum is having none of it, instead telling her to quit the sport. As the pair argue, the new paper boy, Biki Jin, arrives at the house with the newspaper. It's his first day and he overhears everything, eventually throwing the newspaper, but breaking the peeing boy's statue outside. As fate would have it, there's even a note specifically saying not to deliver newspapers. Unfortunately, this fake statue has had its penis knocked off, and it's the crux of Hidu's anger as she heads out and confronts the paperboy. Jin has only just moved into the neighborhood, and he's got a part-time job in the comic book store too. Funnily enough, Hidu is actually a regular here, and she shows up looking for the next volume of Full House, the comic she's been reading. However, the one she's handed in happens to have a large bogey right across the page, and he calls her out for defacing it. That night, Hidu sneaks into Taeyang High and drops to her knees, pleading with Ko Chang to teach her. She declines but does encourage her to try and transfer there if she can. When a big fight breaks out in the streets between a bunch of girls, Hidu seizes the opportunity to show her skills, grabbing an umbrella and using that as a fencing weapon to thwart a guy who arrives to mess up her plans. You see, Hidu is so desperate to transfer that she's willing to get herself arrested to see this happen. The other girls all stop and watch her fight, but everything goes horribly wrong when she fails to get arrested. However, this scene does help to show the girl has some serious skills. That same umbrella though, is eventually thrown down to Yurim later that afternoon by Hidu, who hides up on the roof and calls out that she's a fan. Things go from bad to worse later that day when Hidu shows up at a club as a minor. She's adamant on doing something illegal, but when she's called into a private room, who should be there but Yijin? He's not exactly comfortable with her arrival, but one of the other guys berates Yijin, claiming he's gotten cheap since his family went bankrupt. Yijin ignores the warnings of the men and takes Hidu outside. He warns her that things could have gone really badly. It's here she opens up about losing her dreams of fencing. Yijin though, knows all about losing things, given his family history, and encourages her to come up with a better plan if she wants to succeed. Yijin also tells her she needs to hold on to her dream and not let that go. After finding out each other's names, Hidu decides he can continue to deliver newspapers after all. In the morning, Hidu ends up in a big argument with her mum. As things escalate, she rips up Hidu's comic book, which is a step too far. You see, Hidu's mum is pretty cold toward her daughter, and over the years, Hidu has always found solace in the words and pictures of the comic. This have been bad since her father has passed away, which could explain Hidu's mother's depression and cold demeanor. As the tears well up in her face, she eventually composes herself and walks away, not even looking at her daughter as she leaves the house for work. Unfortunately, Hidu is left in a sticky situation given the comic she's returning has ripped pages that are certainly not fit for the shelf. She does her best to replace the pages though, drawing them in herself. When Hidu returns the book, she's an absolute wreck and struggles to get her words out around her cries. For Yujin though, he takes the comic back home and begins reading what she's done, struggling to hold in his laughs. Her spelling is pretty atrocious. In the morning, Hidu shows up to see Ko Chiang. She manages to pass the first test, swiping an apple in her sword in midair. The second test, a complete and utter failure. She has to guess odds or evens and she fails every time. she even lose her shoes. However, her tenacity and Coach Yang's skills are enough for her to allow Hedu to study at Yanghai. Interestingly, it turns out that she was already granted a place there before. Hedu's mum actually showed up earlier in the day and asked her for a chance to teach Hedu. She may be prickly and standoffish, but this woman also has a heart too and can see how important it is to her daughter. So Hedu manages to go to her new high school after all, and calls out to Yi-jin for his help in achieving this. Only, he's already passed the house and dropped off the paper. Still, he happens to overhear all of this from behind the hedges, and smiles warmly, issuing a congratulations her way. Episode 1 ending explained. 2521 gets off to a really solid start, channeling those vibes from the Reply series and adding that into a storyline that has sprinklings of Racket Boys and other sport dramas like Fight for My Way. This wonderful little blend works surprisingly well, and although the episode is a little slow to begin with, the drama and stakes are pretty high, and certainly lead to some big moments late on. It's clear that Hedu is going to become an amazing fencer, but the ride to get there is paved in doubt and uncertainty. Hopefully these flashbacks will show what's happened, as well as inspiring our little ballerina to don her shoes again and jump back into the lion's den. There's a great message in this about never giving up too, and that resonates right the way through the 70-minute episode. So far Hedu's ties with Yi-jin have been nicely developed, although it'll be interesting to see who her online buddy is that she's been communicating with. There's definitely a lot to like with this one, and it seems TVN may have struck gold with this. However, it's way too early to be jumping on the hyperbole train, so we'll have to wait and see what tomorrow's follow-up has in store for us.